And this is, in fact, while you're talking about mentality, Doctor, it takes me back to our first episode of Vantage Point, where we spoke about a change in mentality, how important that is currently in the political and social framework in Sri Lanka, how we need to move out of that, you know, just that box, limited mentality that we've been living in, where our parents have been from. And I think that is going to be very important now. And I think with the Commonwealth Youth Forum too, that's a good place to talk about the mentality of Sri Lanka, how it should change from being, you know, particular caste only, particular race only, particular religion only, to, as you said, the totality.
On top, you know, a particular race, caste, religion, linguistic group on top, and everybody else underneath, a kind of a vertical rather than a horizontal a kind of relationship. I think that the Commonwealth logo, which is beautiful, you know, with these colored petals, should become a national logo, where diversity, these petals are all equal, and that should be the attitude of Sri Lanka to itself. That we celebrate this diversity. Now, we made a change. For instance, the holding of the Northern Provincial Council election shows a shift, certainly at the level of the presidency, because the president decided to go ahead with this. Certainly there were external compulsions and reasons, but he could have just said no, but he went ahead and had this. Now, I'm not sure that the rest of the state apparatus has really caught up. So, at the level of society, I think young people are thinking differently. They're far more open to each other, far less dogmatic, far more caring about the suffering across the ethnic divide or the religious divide, far more open to dialogue. But they don't rule as yet.
But do you believe the youth of the entire Sri Lanka is in this sort of level that you're talking about?
Not yet. No, not yet. Which is why we saw some extremism earlier this year of an ethno-religious nature. But in the main, I think the youth are in transition to a better state of mind. But they don't. I mean, they are not the ones who make the rules. And there's been something that's very distressing, which is coming to the open over the last few days. That according to the global gender gap index, the levels of equity in Sri Lanka, which used to be fairly good between men and women, have declined sharply between 2012 and 2013. In 1 year, we have slipped several places in terms of economic equity and political participation. So the gap between men and women is increasing, though there are more women than ever being educated. So the treatment of women, which means young women as well, has been deteriorating. I think that from what I have seen and experienced, we have been witnessing a leap backward, a kind of a social retrogression in attitudes, when we should be moving forward socially in terms of our mentality to meet the complex new challenges, of which the relationship with the north of Sri Lanka is probably the most important.
Well, on that note, we're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll be talking about Sri Lanka ahead of the Chogam. Welcome back to Vantage Point, and I'm in conversation with Dr. Dayan Jayatilleka. Now, Doctor, we were talking about the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting and the sort of international attention that has come to Sri Lankan shores in the wake of this summit. The summit has not even begun, and there's so much of talk about the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Now, we spoke about India and how it's reacting to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting being held in Sri Lanka, and also about the Northern Provincial Council. Let's stretch it a bit. Let's go to Britain. We see a lot of pressure on British Prime Minister David Cameron as well. You initially said, you know, I mean, who would have thought so much of pressure on the British Prime Minister on a tiny state in the Indian Ocean. And incidentally, some of the politicians here in Sri Lanka said, who cares about the Commonwealth? It's a group of countries that are coming, and these countries, were ruled by the British, and it's just another summit. It shouldn't be of importance. But I think all of them have been proved wrong by the amount of attention that Sri Lanka has been getting. And David Cameron has got a lot of opposition from the Labour Party opposition, saying, you should not attend the Commonwealth, the heads of government meeting, due to Sri Lanka's human rights record.
Well, Mahina, nothing illustrates the internationalization of Sri Lanka's post-war crisis, which, by the way, I believe the state thinks that there isn't one, but anyway. Nothing illustrates it better than the fact that Prime Minister David Cameron of Britain thought that he had to get the support of Aung San Suu Kyi and tap into her enormous global moral prestige to justify his attendance at the Chogam in Colombo, because it's a serious business in Parliament, the parliamentary opposition. This is not just some small party, this is the British Labour Party. The shadow foreign minister called on the Prime Minister not to attend. The British Labour Party opposition has officially called for a boycott. Now, David Cameron sought to leverage some support from Aung San Suu Kyi and said, look, I'm going to Colombo, Port Chogam, my opposition says don't, what do you think, am I not doing the right thing? Of course, I'm paraphrasing it. And Aung San Suu Kyi said, well, I think you should, because for 20 years when I was in jail, I used to tell foreigners, you must visit, but you must talk to everybody, all stakeholders, not only to the government. So yes, go down there and tell it like it is. Who would have thought that Sri Lanka would have been in this kind of situation? That our external relations would be so fraught. Now, long before you were born, in fact, I think before I was born, well, a very famous British writer, Graham Greene, wrote a book which was exceedingly well known, called The Ugly American. This was about it was a work of fiction, but it was about the view of the United States as a country that was engaging in coups and conspiracies and so on. Now, because of the success of the international campaign against Sri Lanka and also the failure of the Sri Lankan government's own counter-campaign, we have the phenomenon of the ugly Sri Lankan. Now that may not be the reality, but it's out there. And David Cameron doesn't dare come without some covering fire from Aung San Suu Kyi of Myanmar. Stephen Harper says he's not coming. The Indian Prime Minister is not sure whether he can afford to come or not. There's a big debate in India. I myself sort of put my 2 cents worth in with an op-ed piece in the Hindu as to why India should attend, why Prime Minister should attend. But there it is. And Sri Lanka thinks it's a storm in a teacup. It's not. This is a global reality TV show. Whatever we do, when we respond to Newsfirst or whatever, when somebody very important says that the late Mr. Nimala Ruben, who was never convicted of being a terrorist, is a terrorist. All of this plays on the global screen. That is international public opinion, and now increasingly international political opinion, because it's parliamentarians and also world leaders who are receiving these messages. Now the Commonwealth Summit will mean unprecedented media attention. And it's a race between Sri Lanka's ability to project a credible and basically positive message and image, and that of the anti-Sri Lanka campaigners, who are quite diverse really, to blacken and damn Sri Lanka. So I just hope that nobody in authority plays right into the hands of the anti-Sri Lanka movement out there, because there is a global movement, and they made quite a bit of headway. I mean, I would suggest that we conduct ourselves with an eye to that global reality TV show that we are on now. The cutouts have to come down. That's one thing, because when those Commonwealth leaders turn up, they're going to judge us by their own standards. I mean, there's no country in the Commonwealth in which, outside of a province or state like Tamil Nadu, where national leaders' cutouts are all over the place, and they're going to judge us by that, maybe unfairly. So we have to be aware of how we look. We cannot just be our sort of worst selves and then think, look, we're now the chap of the Commonwealth and everybody loves us and they've got to accept us the way we are. No, we have got to change ourselves. This is what Myanmar did. Myanmar took over on the 9th of October, this October, as the chair of ASEAN. And there are all the leaders holding hands like this. Nobody's saying a word against Myanmar. Why? Because Myanmar, in order to get that chairpersonship of ASEAN, knowing what it could do for the country, that it was the portal through which Myanmar could be normalized globally, changed within itself. And we know the changes. Now, Sri Lanka has chosen not to do that. We are staying the way we are, except for the Northern Provincial Council election, which was a good move. But even that we are beginning to mess up by overreacting negatively to whatever Mr. Vigneswaran says. Instead of using that to showcase post-war democracy in Sri Lanka. Now, the problem, as I said, is this image of the ugly Sri Lankan, like the image of the ugly American. We are either not conscious of that or we don't care. But we will have to care, because the massive convergence of media opinion, of the media on Sri Lanka during Chogam, will show the world various aspects of Sri Lanka. So we should get the military off the streets. That's the other thing. These leaders, I mean, when they look around and they say too many, I mean, security is one thing, but too many armed soldiers, whether it's in the north or the rest of the country, they're going to come to certain conclusions. So those two things, the cutouts and the overly heavy presence of armed, uniformed men, should go out the window in the next 15 days. Otherwise, we are going to pay, because that's going to be used to depict Sri Lanka in a manner that is perhaps not quite true or accurate. And that will affect us very badly in international politics, and including during the vote in Geneva in March 2014.